and welcome to Africa This Week with me, Ayo Johnson. This show looks at the affairs of sub-Saharan Africa and the African diaspora. Today we'll be looking at Brazil and its importance in relation to African history. But first, the UN peacekeeping force in Central African Republic, MONUSCO, was criticized last month by the government for failing to prevent violence that left more than 60 people dead. Adama Munu has more on this and the rest of the week's headline news.
On Monday, the Central African Republic said more than 60 people died in violence in its capital last month, and it also stepped up accusations that the clashes were part of an attempted coup. The violence began on September 26th after the murder of a Muslim driver, and then spread to several districts of the city before French troops and UN peacekeepers from the 10,000-strong MONUSCO force restored calm. The country was due to stage presidential and legislative elections on October 18th, but the polls will have to be postponed because of delays in registering voters. Congo's government has called for an October referendum on allowing veteran leader Denis Sassou Nguesso to run for a controversial third term. The 72-year-old, who has already notched up more than 30 years in power, is currently barred by the Constitution from seeking another term due to an age limit of 70 and a limit to 2 presidential terms. When he announced his intention to run for a third term, it sparked a massive protest in the country's capital, Brazzaville. The general behind Burkina Faso's failed coup was charged, together with a former top aide to ousted President Blaise Compaoré, with murder and attacking state security on Tuesday. General Gilbert Diendere and Djibril Bassol, a former foreign minister under Compaoré, were also charged with collusion with foreign forces to destabilize internal security and intentional destruction of property over the short-lived September 17th putsch. East African nations are preparing for the El Niño phenomenon, expected to last until early 2016. In Kenya, Nairobi city workers raced against the clock on Wednesday, digging up and unclogging drainage systems and waterways to control floods in the areas most at risk. The 3 West African countries at the heart of the Ebola epidemic recorded their first week with no new cases since the outbreak began in March 2014. The outbreak has killed more than 11,000 people in Sierra Leone, Guinea and Liberia, according to the World Health Organization. New cases have fallen sharply in 2015, but the World Health Organization has warned that the disease could break out again. On Thursday, an Ebola scare was reported in southern Nigeria. 10 people were quarantined in Calabar after coming into contact with a man who showed Ebola-like symptoms. Ebola arrived in Nigeria in July 2014 when a Liberian businessman collapsed at Lagos airport, but the outbreak was contained with 7 deaths, far fewer cases than in the worst-hit countries of Sierra Leone, Guinea and Liberia. Boko Haram on Wednesday published a new propaganda video in which an unidentified fighter read a statement in Hausa in Arabic, flanked by more than a dozen armed fighters. The 17-minute video was posted under the name Islamic State in West Africa Province, which Boko Haram has used since its pledge of allegiance to the ISIS group leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in March. This follows President Buhari setting his military commanders a 3-month deadline to early November to end the violence, which has left at least 17,000 dead since 2009. But there are more compounding problems for Buhari. Money belonging to former Nigeria oil minister Diezini Alison Moduke was seized following her arrest in London on the 2nd of October. The ex-petroleum minister, who was in the role between 2010 and 2015, was apprehended with 4 other people by the National Crime Agency for suspected bribery and money laundering offences.
To discuss the last story, we have Adekoya Boladele, who has written Buhari's Governance in Lagos, Nigeria. We also have Lagun Akinloye, who is a political analyst in Nigerian affairs based right here in London. Welcome to the show, guys. Adekoya, how damaging do you think that the current UK-Nigeria relationships is right now, especially with the arrest of a former minister?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's actually devastating, though it doesn't come as a surprise to most of us. Everyone has actually have, for a very long time, we've felt there is need to call individuals like ourselves to question, to give account of our stewardship, especially holding such a lucrative and a sensitive position as a Minister of Petroleum Resources. And for the discrepancies in the ministry, it is important that she should give account, like I said. So when we got it, news that she was arrested in UK, I think it's actually a kind of relief to most Nigerians that maybe through that process she will be, because most individuals, they've lost hope in the judicial system back home. So we feel maybe because the UK offers a better legal process, then maybe the UK is good enough to ensure that justice is served.
Justice is served. Lagun, do you subscribe to that? And please put it in the context of Alison Maduka now leaving office in March. We had Buhari stating that corruption will be at the top of his game in terms of eliminating that from Nigeria. And of course, we know he's placed so many reforms. How successful are these reforms going to be in the light of what's happened already?
I think in reference to Alison Maduka, the former Minister of Petroleum, she was a huge part of the former administration of President Goodluck Jonathan. She was one of his point guards. She was the first woman to be appointed Minister of Petroleum. And sadly, allegations of billions of dollars going missing under her watch were leveled against her. After she had stepped down as Minister of Petroleum, supposedly she had begged some former heads of states to go and see Buhari, the new president, to give her a soft landing. Buhari obviously is, everyone is fully aware, he's a no-nonsense anti-corruption advocate, and turned down all entries to him to give her a soft landing. So I think he sought the help of American authorities, British authorities, to repatriate the billions of dollars of stolen Nigerian funds that are lodged in all these accounts. I think he's going to use the Alison case as a centerpiece to his war on corruption. He will use her as an example, as this is a new government. We are here to change things. She most likely was the most, not most corrupt person, but her ministry is the lifeline of the Nigerian government. She was the overall head of the petroleum ministry. Now, if he can get her back and get the money back, then his anti-corruption drive and his policy will actually be believed by the people.
Well, believed by the people, sending shivers down the spines of many governors throughout the Nigerian political structure.
Yeah.
Adekoya, how lucrative is the oil industry right now in Nigeria?
Yeah, I think the greatest extent is actually more of a global crisis. Presently, the country is hovering around the price of crude is around $40 per barrel. And with Nigeria, the 2015 budget, the benchmark was of $53 per barrel. And even as at the $53 per barrel, we're still having a deficit of 1.2 trillion naira in the budget. So now, if Nigeria, with our budget running at around $40 per barrel on the crude oil, it's no longer a lucrative industry in Nigeria, because if you look at the past administration, there were a lot of windfalls. So we had a lot of resources to meet up with our budgets, and there were even excesses also that was squandered by most of the public office holders. But presently now we're trying to even meet budgets. A lot of borrowings will be done. So that is why the government is looking at diversification of the economy, because Nigeria is only a mono economy dependent system, where we depend majorly. Over 75% of our revenue comes from crude oil. So presently now, what we are looking at is to ensure that we have diversified means of revenue, where you can get revenue either from agriculture, from alternative energy, or from the indirect sector. But presently now, the oil industry is not as it used to be. It's not something Nigeria can rely on presently. And if Nigeria has to rely on it, definitely we'll be heading towards recession economic recession, just as the central bank governor has outlined.
Well, on the issue of recession, which is a worrying factor across the African continent, not alone with Nigeria, but if Nigeria has a cold, the rest of the continent seem to catch it as well. Lagun, put it in context for us. We've got oil, which is central to Nigeria's gameplay in terms of revenue, a lack of diversification into other areas of agriculture, which one would have thought for a country that size to be able to develop and evolve. How much does Buhari have to do right now to get the agricultural sector going? And please put that in the context of the fact that he hasn't even put his cabinet together as yet.
Okay, from my point of view, that is one of the biggest ills of Nigeria. Previously, pre-independence and pre-discovery of oil, agriculture was the mainstay of the Nigerian economy. Cocoa, cash crops. It was the breadbasket of not only West Africa, but the continent in general. The discovery of oil has made the average Nigerian incredibly lazy because the profit margins weigh in the favor of oil, but then it only goes into the hands of certain people. So what's happened is that oil has become, as they say, the black gold, but the poison chalice at the same time. In 2014, Nigeria made $77 billion worth of oil revenue. Now you ask yourself, where did the money go? Sadly, to the elite kleptocracy. What Buhari must do, and which he has said, is Nigeria has multiple acreages of mining. Like fertile land for agriculture throughout the country. This would generate employment, this would generate livelihood for millions of people. Now, to the credit of the last administration, the former Minister of Agriculture, Adekoya Boladele, who actually is now recently elected the President of the African Development Bank, he put forward some programs that I hope that the President Buhari will move forward with. The agriculture sector has been moving up year on year on year, but it's not only agriculture, it's mining, it's service industries, it's industries that will generate employment. Going to the issue of the ministers, on Thursday it was brought before the Senate, and he has put forward the name of 20 people who will fill in these major ministries. And I sincerely hope that he's chosen the right people, for the sheer reason that Nigeria needs to focus more on agriculture and on mining and on these various industries that will help people get out of poverty.
Well, Adekoya, you can see that Lagun is very optimistic that the cabinet will address all the fundamental issues. But on the issue of reforms, the President Buhari has already stated that he will take the fight to Boko Haram. And we know already that Boko Haram has other ulterior motives in relation to Nigeria. How do you think this is going to play out in the context of oil and in the context of new ministers who are likely to take new roles for which Boko Haram has been around for a very, very long time?
To be sincere, I think the issue of insurgents, that is Boko Haram, is a very pathetic one. Is one that has been giving a lot of Nigerians nightmares, especially in the northeastern part of the country. I think the president's administration has made it clear that has given the military the deadline. But let's look at the practicability now. When you give someone a deadline, now depends on how visible such deadline is. If the country has been battling Boko Haram for the past 4 or 5 years, and you're giving them deadline of few months to crush Boko Haram, we must start looking at how practicable it is. I think the military has they've been doing a lot of job on it, but basically also I don't think a lot has been done, because there are two strategies to warfare. One is winning the war, and one is winning the battle. If Boko Haram is crushed today, what about the after effects? Are there not going to be a lot of sex coming up in the northeastern part of the country? That is one. The secondly, also, for the past few weeks, the military has been claiming to be getting victories over Boko Haram. But all of a sudden, since last week, we've been having repeated bombs attacks, repeated attacks in the Federal Capital Territory, which is Abuja. We've been having in Borno, we've been having in Yobe, we've been having in Damaturu, and it has been going on and on and unabated. So the issue is this: Is it really a PR work that is going on? Is it an image making work that the military is winning the war, or the military is actually winning the war? We understand that in warfare, the media side is very important. But however, the people don't care about the media side. People that the high shot that the daughter just got exploded, or the Zainab that lost her son. They don't care about the media. They don't care about the media.
Adekoya, I agree with you. They don't care, and of course the Nigerian army has to work slightly harder. But let me put this to Lagun. Lagun, we've seen a couple of videos come out from Boko Haram, most recently with Abubakar not being there. What's happened to him, and what's happened to the propaganda war that they've been fighting?
From my point of view, this whole issue about Shakal appearing in videos and not appearing in videos, it is a non-issue. People seem to hark on about it far too often. The main issue is that Boko Haram are still there. Boko Haram are still carrying out raids, are still burning down villages, are still killing people, and the government have found it hard to take care of the issue. The deadline of November is fast approaching, but yet only last week there was a bomb attack in Anyanya on the outskirts of Abuja that killed up to 30, 40 people plus. There are still, they are still active. Now the main issue is the president, when he came on board, rejigged the whole security apparatus of the country. He changed the chief of army staff, the chief of the air force, X, Y, and Z, all of them. Now, have they been making advances? It seems to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And that's my point of view, is not good enough if they have to put an end to Boko Haram.
Well, Lagun, not good enough. Clearly, Boko Haram saga is going to stay with us for a very long time to come. Adekoya and Lagun, thank you very much for your comments. We're moving on to discuss articles that have made this week's headlines. Joining me is our reporter, Anissa Omar. Anissa, a week has gone by, a lot for you to ponder. What's caught your eye?
So our first story is from Disrupt Africa, and it's called Can Bitcoin Find Its Niche in Africa? And Bitcoin is effectively mobile money. So selling goods and buying goods via electronically via your mobile or other electronic device.
But hang on a second, could it be a perfect fit for Africa? Could it become popular?
It could, because Africa is a place where mobile money is, fast growing, not just in many parts, in East and in West. I know myself, when I travel to Somaliland, we use mobile money just to buy simple purchases. In regards to Africa, and in this article, it focuses very much so on remittances and the fact that we, as the diaspora, give almost 30 billion diaspora, of our money. To the continent, and that is a staggering amount, and in some countries that's far more than what's given in aid and in investment. And through this mobile technology, it was hoped that the remittances would be a good platform for it to evolve. Unfortunately, that's not been the case.
So why are companies ditching it then? I mean, for that money that you've just said that's out there, the opportunity is there, but companies are not.
Unfortunately, Bitcoin doesn't have the best PR. It's been linked very much so. There have been a few scandals whereby it's linked to hackings, money laundering, and the dark web. So that has given it a bad representation. Although it does have very good ventures internationally, not just within the Americas, but also within Europe, and it's had links with Facebook and other really big companies. So it was thought that it would do well in Africa, but unfortunately it hasn't.
Disappointing.
Very disappointing.
What else we do? So
now we have a happier story.
Okay.
And it's called What to Expect at the Kampala City Festival. And the Kampala, obviously being Uganda.
Uganda, driving force. What's pushing this festival? I mean, we've had the festival before. It's not the very first time, but it's not as successful, or the energy and the drive is not there like we see now. What's pushing this forward?
Well, it's the biggest sort of street festival in East Africa, and it actually attracts 2 million people. Can you believe?
2 million.
Yeah. So not just from neighbouring countries, but obviously urban dwellers and people from the rural areas within Uganda to come forth and really create those business ventures whereby they can network. And there's obviously wonderful dancing and food and music, but it's really kind of a once in a sort of once in a lifetime, but once-in-a-year event to attend.
But once-in-a-year event to attend nonetheless. But the theme this year is taking a global feel to it, climate change. And how are people going to react with a festival full of happiness but associated with a bit of depression?
A bit of depression. I think it's nice to have that sort of information and to educate people about climate change. Given that East Africa is an area where climate change is doing devastating effects in terms of droughts and floods. So if you're going to have 2 million people in one area, what better place to teach them about climate change? And it's about sort of eco-fashion and also eco-technology and effects of mobiles, because mobiles are very much wasted in terms of the minerals that come from Africa. So it's a place to not only have some fun, but also to have some education.
What else do we have?
So our next story is a blog by the Ethiopian Africa blog, and it's regards to Ethiopia's jobs might grow on trees. And I thought, wow, this is a good title. Ethiopia's jobs might grow on trees.
Is that possible?
It is possible.
I mean, plantation?
Yes, it's in regards to timber plantations and wood. And the fact that we really need industries that are local rather than international, because 100 million of a year is spent on importing timber to Ethiopia, when in actual fact Ethiopia has a staggering amount of timber itself to create this employment and to generate a better way of not just deforesting.
Well, you're talking about employment there. What about working conditions? I mean, how's the government going to tackle that?
Yeah, there are bad working conditions. I'm not going to hide this. But the fact that there's so much high unemployment in Ethiopia and in East Africa in general, this opportunity allows young people to have the jobs that are not necessarily there. So for me, it's really a positive story. The down point is that obviously it's at its beginning, it's at its catalyst really. So the industry is not necessarily booming as yet, but it's to come.
Do you think the government will succumb the poverty issue to do with employment, which it needs to address, by using these trees, provided it addresses the ugly connotations associated with it to do poor labour practices? Do you think it can succeed?
I think it can, because the fact that Ethiopia is so, rural, and the fact that there is so many people that are living in close proximities to these potential plantations. So it's a way of effectively using the local population to do work that would otherwise be imported.
Very clever. What else do we have?
Our last story is in Nigeria, and it's 15 airports get satellite navigation systems.
Now, hang on a second. I mean, when I hear about planes coming into the runway unaided, without ground support, I get very nervous.
I would too. But apparently this is following international standards to some extent, including according to the Director of Nigerian Airspace and Management. It's in line with global migration from ground-based navigation to satellite navigation. So it's a way of following not just the standards within the African continent, but internationally. And it's happening in Benin, Calabar, and Ibadan. So that is the areas within Nigeria that it's going to be happening.
So the communication goes up into space and it comes down back. And we've seen already communications can fail. What sort of assurances are they giving to the public that safety standards and aviation standards would not be compromised at all?
Unfortunately, there has not been as yet a statement, as it were, in this regard. But I would say, again, let's look at it as a positive way, whereby Africa is usually becoming more efficient in its economic development, in the sense that it's creating a platform for which to compete on international standards, and that aviation is really a big topic within Africa. It's a massive continent. There's so many flights. So it's a positive story in the sense that we're moving up on, not just on par, but in our own way, and within a way that allows for a more efficient and more viable economy.
Talking about efficiency and a viable economy, I've been to Nigeria. I've travelled across Nigeria using internal flights. Sometimes a bit nervy, other times pretty comfortable. I'm sure the experience would be one that a lot of people would welcome.
I think so. I think it would be it would be a way of really kind of perhaps using the space that was from the ground, from navigating these airplanes from the ground, and rather using that space perhaps more for increasing the runway or creating more job opportunities elsewhere, perhaps building a mall or what have you. So I think it's a way of very much so including people, but in a different manner.
Well, our very own Anissa Omar, thank you so much. We're taking a short break, but when we come back, we'll be looking at Brazilian history and its connection to African Muslims as part of Black History Month. See you in a moment.